Welcome to the Thriving Children podcast, the show that helps parents and teachers to put the magic back in child development. Here's your host, Clare Crew.
This is episode 111 of the Thriving Children podcast. I'm Clare Crew, and today I'm chatting with Anna Meadows and Natalie Smith all about technology. Welcome to the show, Natalie and Anna.
Hi, Claire. Hi, Anna.
Hi. Hi, Natalie. Hi, Claire.
I should say welcome back because you guys have been on before. And I think last time, what did we talk about last time with the three of us?
The three wishes, was that the one?
Oh, three wishes. That's right. Our wishes. Absolutely. So we wanted to do another one of these episodes with the three of us, and technology came instantly to mind because we all see quite a bit in regards to screen time that concerns us. So maybe, Nat, you could start off with what you see at the moment.
Okay, so my biggest concern with technology is the use of it so early on in a child's education, and even home time, I guess, as well. But what you're seeing more and more is that with the push down of the curriculum is that we're seeing a lot more of, use of iPads and big screens and things like that, cutting into time that really should be there for play and physical development and things like that. So that's my big issue at the moment is, I think one of the things that bugs me a lot that I hear in kindy and pre-primary is when you hear a teacher saying, oh, they're using iPads, good for fine motor activity. And that just, really
it's absolutely
grates
not.
on me because it's not.
And
so I'd say that's my big issue.
Absolutely. And they've even got things that you can buy, to hold an iPad or an iPhone on the side of the pram or on a potty, and you just go, oh my goodness, what kind of world are we living in where we need a tool like that to help prop up a screen in front of our baby?
Yeah, to pass the time or keep them quiet.
Anna, what do you see? What do you want to add?
All of the above. I just think that we're just dealing with this 24/7. Everything is digitized. Life is a faster paced modern day. We used to use Melways and white pages, and the telephone at home was the landline, and we all had to share it and take turns. And shop hours were predictable, and you'd go down to the phone box if you were out and about. And now everything we go to do in every aspect of our day is with a screen. You're looking up maps, you're paying bills, you're banking, you're organising your calendar and commitments, train times, shop hours, and as well as all of the entertainment sort of side of things as well. Everything is with us, some sort of technology, regardless of what your age is, adults and kids. And I think that that's where we're all, parents and teachers and students, are having this massive challenge of how do we strike this balance of living with technology but in a positive way.
Have either of you guys seen the show that's on at the moment in Australia, Back in Time for Dinner?
No,
tell us about it.
It's with I think her name's Annabelle Crabb. So she is on quite a few shows, and I think sometimes she's a political commentator as well. So it's a show where they're taking an Australian family and essentially they're getting them to spend a week living as a family would in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s.
Oh, wow.
I think last night's episode I haven't seen yet. That was in the 80s. So what they've actually done and continue to do each episode, so there's a decade for each episode, they will they've changed the downstairs inside of this family's home to reflect the era. So like a brand new kitchen each episode and everything, looking how it would for a family in that era. And so, of course, there's this family where I think the youngest is 10. They've got 3 children and then they've got 2 teenagers. And, you know, like a lot of families, even the teenagers are having a lot of time on their devices. They're not really engaging and interacting together. The mum is the one, I think the dad works as well, but she's got quite a high-powered role, and he's the one who enjoys cooking. I think his profession is tied in with food and hospitality, so he does the bulk of stuff in the kitchen. And now all of a sudden, particularly in the first episode in the 50s, they were wearing the 50s clothing. All of a sudden their open plan kitchen dining space was shrunk down to this teeny little kitchen. The mum had to do all the cooking. No one was allowed to help her. And she had to cook food that was reflective of what people ate back then as well. And so it's, you know, I guess they focus quite a bit on the food, but you get a look at Australia's history in each decade as well, and the fashion and the music. My children are finding it fascinating. But also what was really noteworthy is that for that 10-year-old in that family who's part of the show, she's just loving it. Like the older 2 are like, oh my goodness, like we haven't got our screens. It's forcing us to interact with each other. And the 10-year-old is like, oh, they play board games with me now. And we've just gone out and done skipping outside. And she's just loving it. But it's a really interesting look at really how very quickly, especially in the last few decades, our everyday lives have changed. And in so many ways it is for the better. But you're right, Anna, there does need to be, I think, some really conscious decision-making in regards to making sure that we get the benefits without too many of the negatives as well.
Yeah.
I wonder how that mum in the 50s was coping with the recipe books rather than just searching, you know,
online communities.
I think
what's a dairy-free, nut-free? You know, we're for so many aspects of our day, and you know, it's a great tool. But I think that's what we need to remember. It is a tool, and there are. I don't think. And please enlighten me if anyone knows, but I don't think that there are any really great studies or longitudinal studies of the effects of what all this technology is having on us, you know, in that long term. I guess it would be so hard to even ascertain because the technological demands are changing on a daily basis. So I don't know how you'd even find that out.
And it is a lot more heavy now than, you know, that has allowed enough time for any longitudinal studies too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that interesting, Claire, when you were talking about that show and how the kids were going, oh, they play with me now and they do this. And I think a lot of parents, when they try to take the devices off children, they get that backlash and then don't sustain it for long enough to see the fact that these kids actually enjoy not being on it.
Absolutely. And for some children, it can just be, you know, changing boundaries around how long the devices can be used for. I think for some children, it's almost got to be cold turkey, at least initially, so that they can really tap back into that play drive again, really become interested in other human beings, you know, in playing with their siblings. And I think for parents as well, knowing that it's not always smooth sailing when your children play together, just like it's not in the schoolyard either. There will sometimes be arguments. Sometimes there's even going to be hurting. Sometimes, you know, the drama escalates. But usually I'm just listening to that and I'm aware of that, and it actually gets resolved by themselves if you give them that chance to do it. And so I think sometimes when parents feel like they're solely responsible for their children to be happy playing together and for their children to engage together without those bumpy bits, it becomes easier or seemingly easier to give a device to a child because it is more passive. They might be arguing if there's only one device that they have to share, but if they've all got their own, it tends to be half an hour or an hour or however long where they're not feeling like they need to step in as the ringleader. But really, sometimes we'll need to step in as the ringleader, but I think that we don't need to as often as we are.
I think, and honestly, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I think is happening there, because I've had, we've just moved from the country and we had 4.5 acres where we were in the country, and the kids had a very big expanse. It wasn't very tree heavy. And so my kids were never inside. And so if they fought outside and I didn't hear them. Because they're outside, they got over it quicker, because we know that nature, it soothes children. So they get over it and they'll move on quicker. Whereas if they're inside walls and everything's heightened. And that's what I find, is that people are putting their kids on devices more because they're inside more, because they don't have the space to go outside and play. And even though we're on 2.5 acres here, it's very tree heavy, and my boys don't have that big expanse to go out and play and kick and stuff like they did in the country. So I find that they're on top of each other more and they're fighting more. And so there's that, I can see why parents would go, oh my goodness, just take this iPad and go and sit down and get out of my face, because I can't handle what you're doing.
Yeah, I think we actually need to acknowledge too that you've just reminded me, Nat, every family and every household will have a completely different set of circumstances and challenges. And, we've got lots of families like ours that are in really small space living, and others, in the city, some in the suburbs, big families, small families, and all sorts of different habits and all sorts of other challenges as well, including time and other resources. But different things are going to work for different families. And unfortunately, as much as I'm sure all three of us would love to just say, click our fingers and say, this is the golden solution for every single person, I think it's one of those things where sit down and think, okay, what's going on in our family, in our household? What do we need to change, and what's going to work for us here? And you're right, Claire. Sometimes that cold turkey is exactly what's needed. Sometimes that's not. Sometimes it might be a different kind of strategy, but different things are going to work for different families.
Absolutely. And I think there needs to be awareness too about, okay, if we are reducing this thing, what else are we going to bring in, at least for this short term, to make that actually sustainable? I know that Teacher Tom recently has been in Australia, and at his talk he was sharing a lot of stories from his own childhood, and I think it really struck a chord with a lot of us as educators and as parents in the room, how quickly things have changed. And he talked about that as a child, and this was very much reflective of my childhood in England, very different from when we moved here to Australia age 9. And I don't know if that's because things, anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. I'm not quite sure the reason for that. Maybe because in England we lived in a small village and most people knew each other. That's probably it. Or maybe Australia was a bit more, had already moved into that stage of sheltering their children a little bit more. But certainly what Teacher Tom was talking about was what I'd experienced too, of, going out of the home, out into the neighbourhood, knocking on friends' doors saying, will you come and play? Will you come and play? And we could go to the playground or the woods or into these shared spaces, and we didn't have to be home until it was dark. Or he was saying, my mum had a bell that sounded like this, and so-and-so's mum would whistle, so you kind of knew the cues for all the kids in the neighbourhood of, oh, you need to go home now, it's dinner time, or you've got an appointment, or, your nana's arrived, and things like that. And so he said, the parents of that era used to get frustrated with us all inside and would go, okay, go outside and play now. Whereas now we're experiencing that too, but we're not necessarily feeling that we can send our child out into the neighbourhood, especially if they're probably going to be the only one these days. And so we're saying, here's the iPad. So that's that's one of the reasons he was explaining that change has happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
It does happen like that. I can tell you it has happened in a very fast time, in a very short amount of time. When I was a kid, and when my brothers were growing up too, the youngest brother of mine's 14 years younger, we were doing the same thing, Claire. It was everyone out in the street, and who's around to play? Right. Get the cricket bat out, roller skate up and down the street, whatever you were going to do, go visit your friend. And now there's a lot less of that. But I'm just wondering if we can kind of take a little bit of a step back a little bit from the why it's happening and why we're in this kind of rut of launching for the screens for behaviour management, or settle an argument or whatever, and just have a bit of a chat about what's actually going on when kids are on the screens, the problems with using screens. Why is this such a concern for so many families and so many educators and therapists?
Absolutely. Why don't you lead, Anna?
I'd be happy to. Look, I know that
she's waiting for it. I can feel it.
I'm just like, yeah. So I know that definitely from a pediatric occupational therapy point of view, there are so many things going on when children sit down at a screen. And, one of the things that happens is we know that the electromagnetic radiation that is, in all these screens, and it can be anything, television, computer, tablet, smartphone, the watches, the Kindles, all sorts of different screens. They're all in the same bucket of things, and they're emitting this light that's suppressing melatonin, and that's what upsets the sleep cycle. So what we're getting is this really disrupted sleep. That's affecting mood, it's affecting behaviour, it's affecting, emotions and kids' abilities to just function during the day. And that's why one of our first recommendations for curbing the screen addiction is looking at the evening screen use. If we're going to look at, one really key part of the day, evening screen use is going to have the biggest impact on sleep. And that's not, new news. There's loads of studies around that. But the other thing that's happening from a sensory point of view is that when you use a screen, you're absolutely overstimulating the visual processing system. So you're getting really fast-paced cartoons, fast-paced games, fast-paced action, lights, movement, and so your visual sensory system is being really bombarded. And at the same time, your vestibular system, and so all of the movement, your movement system is kind of on hold, because your head's in this kind of same, your body's in this same position. So what happens is we're kind of lulled into this false sense of security that kids are actually calmer when they're on a screen, but the brain is so overactive processing this visual information. It's almost like it's a real over-focus. And then what happens is when you turn that off, when you take it away, not only do you have, the transition out of an addictive game, or out of, that hasn't finished yet, I want to finish what I'm, you then get this massive sensory transition where you're trying to normal pace, real life pace. And your vestibular system is just screaming to be moved. So when you take the iPad or the computer or whatever it is away, you often see kids jumping around and, really moving, seeking, bouncing around fast, because their vestibular system's really out of whack then, and their visual system's in overdrive. They're trying to slow down, balance out, and match the real world. So from a sensory point of view, it can look like it's behaviour, it can look like it's oh, we've taken away the thing that's been really helpful, but in actual fact, it's the complete opposite. Yeah.
Wow, that's so interesting, Anna, and so important for parents and teachers to know
Yeah,
too.
it's almost a trick. It's tricking us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then I think sometimes it's something we need to be mindful of, but then almost the screens get more blame put on them, so it might not necessarily be that particular show doesn't agree with your child, or, your child is being aggressive after they've had screen. It's really just a case of knowing that this is the case, knowing that there's little value for the whole body being offered through a screen, and making sure that we follow up something like that with a bit more supported time from us, with the opportunities to move, maybe be outside or be in more of a sensory soothing environment, as opposed to just going, that screen time was a mistake. Look at them now.
Yeah, well, the same thing goes for any sedentary task that's done in a classroom situation too. I mean, the impact on a child's eyes is the same thing, where they then have to have the same amount of time, 40 minutes or so, to relax their eyes again into a natural state. So they need to be outside doing stuff, looking long distance and things like that, which they're not getting because they're kind of just moving from one task to the next in class. So we're seeing, I was talking to a behavioural optometrist just recently, and she was saying, they're seeing so many more vision problems because of the sedentary tasks that children, or the increase in sedentary tasks that children are doing at school. So the same thing goes for that too.
And yet we sort of, we might plan as an educator to, watch, a 10-minute thing, watch some butterfly emerging from a cocoon or something. And then we just expect, okay, that's 10 minutes of the lesson allocated. Then we'll move on into this task. Like, I think that's what I was trying to say before. We're not necessarily realizing that after doing that, the children's needs are going to be a little bit different. We're really getting frustrated that then they're not on the same page as they were beforehand, as opposed to going, I can still tap into the power of this technology, but I need to do it with awareness.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Because I think we get really hard on, it's easy for us to get hard on teachers and parents and say, this is what happens to your child. But if you're aware of it, and you know how to then counteract that and be very supportive and nurturing of that child, rather than going, oh my gosh, why are you acting this way? You don't have the problem.
And it might be, if we just try and stay real for a little bit, busy families, when you're trying to get meals ready at dinner time, and you've got, it might be terrible weather outside or whatever, you can't just send the kids outside. Parents might say, here, this is your 20 minutes, half an hour of something with the screen while I get the family some food on the table. That's important, that the family gets fed. Yeah. That's important.
Yeah, absolutely.
That kind of takes precedence. And then you just have to know, it's a survival thing. And then you have to just realise, as you say, that balance of, okay, we've had that screen time now. We're going to need a little bit of support to transition from the end of that, when that time comes to an end, into the next activity, which might be dinner. So it might mean do something quite active. Let's, let's throw the balloon around, a bit of balloon tennis or something. I don't know. Something that is actually just a little bit physical, or have a little bit of tug of war, something like that. Get the body moving again. Do some star jumps before you come over to the table.
So then, Anna, just a question. Because, when we do like brain breaks and stuff in the classroom, a lot of teachers use the whiteboard, the smart boards, to do Go Noodle and all of those ones. How does that then, from an OT perspective, and what you got, and Claire too, from what you know, how does that then, does that have a negative impact of using a screen in terms of just doing it with a song or something like that? What's the difference?
Well, yeah, you're right. There is a difference. And again, I think it's about that balance. knowing, okay, so what we're using here is we're really working the visual system again in this activity. We are moving the body. We are, getting some proprioceptive and vestibular input as well. But we are still overworking that visual system at the same time. Yeah. So, I'm a big fan of a lot of that sort of stuff, and the Cosmic Kids. I love that yoga that's online as well. Jamie in the UK is brilliant. But it's just being aware that, yes, we're moving our body, but we're also overworking those eyes as well. And the vestibular system is one of the most fascinating systems. It's coordinating and integrating all the information coming in through our eyes at the same time as the information coming in through our ears and the movement. The vestibular receptors in the inner ear, and as well as the proprioceptive system, which is looking at that body in space, body awareness, at where our joints and muscles are, and so it's all integrated. So if we're overworking and stressing out our visual system with a screen, it's really going to affect how well balanced and coordinated and efficient we're able to move around in the real world. It's really going to play a big part in that.
And that visual stress that children are under, I mean, that's even if you're talking about a school day with no screen time, which is probably pretty rare these days, that visual system is really under stress a lot of the time, because there are so many children who, they're of an age or stage of development where their eyes actually aren't yet well developed enough for things like reading and writing, for the long hours that we're expecting them to do that close range vision.
You're right. It's that close range, isn't it? And fast paced close range.
Yes.
I just have a really hard time dealing with the fact that there's so many of these screens on the back of car seats and prams, like you were saying, or in the shopping trolley. Sitting in the car, looking out the window, exercising your eyes in the pram, taking in all the movement and colour and shapes from all different distances and depths, that's really going to exercise and work those eyes. Not being, up close with another screen in those situations, that's really dangerous. Again, survival might be a different story. If you've got mum in the front seat driving who's absolutely stressed out, sure, you do what you need to do to survive. Or if it's a long journey and you're driving somewhere, I can understand if you put a movie on after dark or whatever. But that kind of, we're going from A to B. It's a 15-minute trip. We're going to stick on an episode of something. It's stressful for the kids' eyes, and visual system doesn't actually fully develop until much later.
And I think as well, then it's about what it's replaced. So I think screens, technology can have definite benefits, can have lots of negative consequences as well. But one part that's often not talked about in regards to technology use is what it's taking time away from. So it is, well, we've kind of hinted at that already. It's taking that time away from movement. But I know that for me, with young children who did not like traveling, oh my goodness, we would do so much singing in the car. I would rattle off even when they were babies. Okay, we've just been to playgroup and this is who we saw and this is what we did. So there were all of these speaking and listening and vocabulary building experiences that an app, no matter how clever the marketing is, just isn't going to deliver to our children.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that non-verbal, subtle, high-level communication.
Yeah,
you're not going to, even the most educational apps are not going to replace a real life person in front of you. Absolutely. Yeah.
So one thing that really I'm seeing a lot at the moment, which concerns me, is the technology use, not even particularly of the children. It's parents there with their children who are constantly checking their phone, staring at a screen, watching a video and not even hearing that their child is trying to say something to them or share something with them that they've done, that they've achieved, or that has piqued their interest. And have you guys watched any of the still face experiment videos on YouTube?
No.
It's really fascinating. It's not a new experiment at all, but there's lots more. And again, this is one of the good things about technology. There are lots of 3 or 4 minute videos that you can watch that show the still face experiment in action. And so what this experiment does is it involves a parent, so a known loved caregiver, and a baby. And they'll
I have seen this.
Yeah, they start the experiment with the baby and the parent interacting as they normally do. And they're feeding off each other's interactions and nonverbal communication. So the baby does something and the parent's giving eye contact and responding and looking and talking and all of those things that we want to be seeing in those child and infant interactions. And then the parent will look away, so they're completely turned away from the child. And when they turn back, they have a still face. So they're now looking at their child, but they are completely blank. So there's eye contact, but there is zero expression. There is zero interaction. And you see the child's evolution. You know, at the start, they're a bit like, oh, this is weird. And they're trying to do things that might have created that, that joy and delight the first time around. Yeah. And then they're just seeing it. Yeah. It's not getting any response. And, you know, and then they end with the parent turning away again and coming back. And then actually they are responding again. But if they repeat that experiment a few times with the same child, they much more quickly get into that really passive or just really stressed state of being.
Emotions.
And it's really sad, isn't it? Like it breaks your heart.
And I fear that
emotions and
exactly.
Yeah, you're exactly not getting that.
When parents are always staring at the screen and they're not interacting with their child, I just feel like it over time, if this is just every now and again, not so much, but if this is how the majority of the interactions are, that there's no eye contact, there's no response, they're children who emotionally, especially from an attachment point of view, they're going to be really vulnerable.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I kind of go, what is more, like, I remember, I still have it now sometimes, but especially from, you know, I had 3 children age 4 and under. I remember how, intense those days were, how boring sometimes they were, but also how delightful they were too. And you've kind of got to be there in the moment to catch those delightful bits. And I think people are struggling with parenthood more than they expected. Sometimes mental health is an issue too. And so they're finding reprieve, or they're finding their joy in this, you know, online world, whether it's Facebook or whether it's something else, but it means that they're not actually seeing this amazing child in front of them. And ultimately...
And then that also adds to their stress too,
though, comparison.
Because I know that I didn't have Facebook until my second child arrived, until a couple of months after she was born. So I notice, I know in me now, I've had to make a very conscious decision to not check my phone, to not go on Facebook, to not do those things, because you fill your brain with so much information from just that one look at Facebook that you can't even concentrate on what your child's saying to you the next time they talk to you, because you are still concentrating on what, you know, 4 other people have put up about their life.
And,
it's,
you know, technology is part of our lives, and often I do feel for parents that might be judged if they're seen looking at their phone when they're at the park with their kids. They might be doing their banking. It might be their one opportunity to you know, book an appointment for their kid at the doctor or whatever. You know, we don't know what they're using that screen for, or it might be they might be actually scrolling Facebook because it's the first 2 minutes that they can sit down. I appreciate that, but it is about that balance and awareness, and how differently do we behave when we don't have a phone in our hands or, you know, a screen with us. So different.
Yeah, and I think it's stuff we need to be mindful of, because I think some parents are concerned that their children are a bit too hooked in to to an iPad or whatever device they're using. But, you know, yes, everything on those devices is created to be addictive. You know, I just read Break the Twitch. I can't remember the name of the author, but he talks about this attention economy. And no matter how old we are, those companies that create the programs and create the apps, they profit from us returning and spending more time there.
Yeah.
And so
it's the instant gratification too, because the more that they use it and the faster they can get information or get, you know, the cartoons, how it stimulates their brain, nothing in real life can give them that.
And so that's part of it. That's that addictive nature. But then also our children, by their very nature, they are observing us very, very closely.
Yes.
And they play out what they see in this adult world. And if they're continually seeing, you know, the adults within their house, but even just out in the wider community, always looking down at a phone, then that's going to be something that they start wanting to do a whole lot more as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was reading something about screen time. There's a PDF, you can get it online, called Facing the Screen Dilemma, Young Children, Technology and Early Education. Have you come across that?
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
It's really, it's very interesting. And they were talking about like nurturing healthy brain development in it. And it was saying that, you know, babies begin life with brains with a huge number of neurons, some that are connected and some which are not. And it's the experiences that they undertake from then on that then connect those neurons. So they're saying, you know, repeated experiences strengthen the connections, they shape their behavior, their habits, and their responses to experiences in the future. So the experiences that they don't have also influence their brain development. So neurons that aren't used are pruned away, and other ones are connected and strengthened. So for better or worse, repetitive behaviours, including watching TV, playing video games and stuff, become compelling biological habits.
You're compelled to watch more and more.
Yeah. So the more time they spend with screens, the more difficulty they have turning off to it when they become older. So it actually becomes very entrenched in their development and in what they want to do later on in life.
It's definitely going to be really interesting watching how all this plays out over time because, you know, we're of a generation where
interesting or scary?
I said interesting. I probably meant scary because we're of a generation where we grew up without all of this and really you know, social media is fairly new in our life, but even computers, we got computers at my high school when I was a teenager. And then I think I was about 15 or 16 when we got our first one at home. And then social media, I wasn't even part of that until I was pregnant with my third child. You know, I avoided it for quite some time, and sometimes I wish I had avoided it for even longer.
Yes, completely.
But yeah, I do hope they're doing longitudinal studies because I do think that it's important to go, okay, this is how we can use things, you know, in a fairly safe way. And these are the recommendations for making sure that it's not too damaging and for individuals of what specific ages as well. Because I guess some of it at the moment we know and some of it's just guesswork.
Yeah. And I think it's actually
but logical guesses based on
what you say,
quite a lot of evidence,
and
but not specifically around the screen.
Yeah, and I think it's also in some ways this big, you know, technology issue has created a lot of good things that have come from people seeing, you know, the impact that it has had on children, because we are in some respects we're kind of heightening the use of it in schools, but in some respects we're also seeing it go the opposite way, where we're seeing a lot more of nature play being brought in, a lot more outdoor play, risky play, and also like forest schools and things like that, getting back to that basics, which we know we've gone too far from.
Absolutely. And the online world is a fascinating tool that we all tap into to share this information. So it's definitely not something, it's definitely not something I want to go away. But I think just sometimes there is so much trust put in, you know, the designers of this technology, that parents don't even stop to question whether this does have any impact in the short term or long term on children.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to note that a lot of these big creators of technology that we've had, you know, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and people like that, they had very strict rules for their own children around technology.
They sure did.
You know, I think we also need to, like, I think a lot of the time now in our very research-based society, we wait for research to be done on these things to give us an answer. And I think we've forgotten that we really need to trust ourselves because,
absolutely, great point.
Like in terms of mothering, you know, there's so many books out there and, you know, parenting and everything. We kind of want someone to say, this is how you do it, rather than just trusting ourselves, relying on our instincts, seeing what we see and going from that. And making our own decisions, because we kind of feel like, well, if they're doing it, we need to do it. And, you know, every child is different. So whatever works for your child, do. But there's got to be, I think the big question, and you were talking about, you know, having a tip at the end, and I think this is what mine is that when you're using technology and screen time and that, as a parent and an educator, what I think you really need to do is reflect on what you're hoping the children will get out of it, what you know about it, and then what are the benefits and are they outweighing, you know, the negative bits of it, you know, because there is a lot that's taken away from young children that we need them to develop by being on those screens that are then actually going to help them cope with being on screens later on in life.
And that some parents have actually said, lots of parents will say, I don't want my child to completely miss out on watching such and such a program or television program, because that's what they talk about at school. That's what their social interaction is at recess and lunch times. And I don't want my kid to be the one that's like, I've never seen it, I'm not allowed to watch it, I don't know what it's about. But as parents, we can actually make these choices to say, all right, let's watch a bit. You don't have to watch it every single day, or, you know, balance that out with what other screens are on and happening.
Yeah. And that alone can be sometimes adding a new layer to, and actually watching things like that with our child so that we can then talk about it and help them to process it. And then later, you know, like with that show that I referenced that I'm watching with my children at the moment, Back in Time for Dinner, there are so many conversations that we've had on multiple occasions since it. And we're going through this music history. So on Spotify each week, you know, we just watch the 70s episodes. So we're listening to 70s music at the moment. So it seems to be helping them learn so much more about Australian history than probably history at school is, because you're actually seeing people live out that experience before your very eyes. So yeah, for sure, there's a lot of good that can come of it, but certainly they wouldn't be getting a lot of those gems or understanding it fully if I wasn't watching it with them. All right, so what's your takeaway, Anna? What's your practical tip?
Ooh, well, look, I'd like to can I give just a couple of very different tips, because I know different things work for different families. Some families have really struggled with taking away the screens, and we've had to really approach their solution in terms of adding the active movement into their schedule, adding in the physical, rather than focusing on this kind of battle with the child or the young adolescent, and having this battle of, you know, being moody and insisting on the screen, saying, okay, we're not going to talk about that, but we're going to add in, you know, this sport or this activity or some other movement-based thing, or we're going to make sure we get this many hours sleep. Definitely, I want listeners to really think about that before bed screen time. Have a set time where it's no screens after that time. Would be another great takeaway. And the other thing I'd really love to give tell families about is that really this whole concept of boredom and coping with boredom. It's challenging for kids. It's challenging for adults as well. But there are so many benefits that come with boredom, and as we all know, that unstructured time, normally it's at a time when kids are transitioning from one activity to another, and they're just not sure what to do or where to direct their attention. It gives them that opportunity to broaden their play experiences and work through all their emotions, anxiety and frustration and restlessness and all of that comes with being bored. That's really valuable. You can't get that from having all your energy and focus taken up by a screen. I could go on and on about all of that.
Did you know?
Boredom.
Boredom's
just so great.
I'm reading at the moment. Beautiful Failures by Lucy Clark. That's the book club book that we've got going on.
Me too, Clare.
Funnily enough, Nat, because you're in the book club. I'm not sure if you've read this chapter or not, Nat, but there was a bit in there that talked about a study from 2015, and it said that most people, this was the finding from the study, most people would rather, sorry, I can't say this without laughing, most people would rather self-administer electric shocks than be alone with their thoughts. Than be alone with their thoughts for 6 to 15 minutes.
That's hilarious.
Wow, that's amazing. No, I haven't read that bit yet.
But if that is true, it's scary.
It is really scary. Isn't it? So I loved what you said, Anna, and what I've just shared kind of taps into that. But also I loved what you shared about, instead of focusing on what you have to take out, really ramp up what you can push in. And I know that that's what a lot of people quite successfully do when they want to change the way that they eat as well. It's like, okay, well, instead of going, okay, chocolate be gone, they're like, okay, well, I'm just going to have, lots of lovely big salads, and I'm really going to ramp up my vegetables. And then you might find you're not so hungry and you're not craving all these other sweet things that you usually have.
Yeah. And look, I really, can I just say one more thing? I am going to anyway. I really love the idea of, as parents and families are thinking about, like Nat said, why are we using the screen in this moment? What is the child getting out of the screen in this moment? If it's because they're just exhausted and tired, then that is key to your solution. What else can we come up with to help this child relax, rejuvenate, energize, whatever? If it's because they're bored, that gives you your solution. If it's because they're just not sure how to, it's really hard work playing with other kids, or they're dealing with other emotions and they just want to block all the emotions out and stare at a screen. Why are they going to the screen is the key to your solution. And some families have tackled that addiction too with really practical little novelty things like having, I've often recommended having screen time money. So pocket money can come in the form of some screen time as well. And that could be a set number of minutes across the week, and you can purchase that at different times with, whatever conditions are for your family. But that's sometimes work to kind of cut back or be a bit more intentional about screen use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as you know that what they're getting out of it outweighs the negatives, then you've got to do what works for you,
Which is such a good point to highlight again, because I think so many people aren't tuned into the fact that there are negatives at all. So now we've got everyone's radar up as far as even just connecting the dots and starting to notice how those children in their lives are after a screen, and start to see if there is a difference when they're more intentional in that, in how the time is used afterwards.
Yeah, and what are they missing out on in that time too? And I think that's a big thing for teachers now, because there is such a big technological push in our classrooms, and so much of it too. Like, it's not just that you have the big whiteboard anymore, which it started with. We used to have to go to the computer lab and do computer time, and now they all have iPads in their rooms, or the children have one-to-one laptop programs, as young as year 4, which I don't agree with, but what are they missing out on? Are they that conversation, that role playing with each other, that connection with each other? It's really hard to hurt someone or bully someone when you have a connection with them. So what is that then producing, negatively for that class? the creativity that's taken away from children there. You push a button and it does it for you. Well, what creatively are they getting from that? And creative people are the people
let's watch
that
all those studies come out.
Yeah, and creative people are what we need
I've
in
got
the world.
one right in front of me. I've got one right in front of me at the moment from the Age in 2015 saying that the OECD report says that computers and iPads in schools does not improve numeracy and literacy skills. So let's just wait and see what comes out
it
here.
is super hard. It's impossible, actually, for us to find a high school as a family that isn't a bring your own device school. And I know that there are a lot of schools where this is actually implemented from about year 4 onwards at a primary level too. So sometimes it's an iPad. I know the high schools, it's a laptop. And yes, we're yet to be in that system to see whether they are on the laptops all day, every day, or if it just might be something that they, have for this lesson or that lesson. I'm not actually sure yet, but it scares me that I can't find a school that doesn't have that big reliance on technology, and they all use it as a selling point. Like, woohoo, great news. You get to spend $500 plus on a device your child will probably break, which means, they've got visualized strain when they come home and they haven't developed handwriting skills and, yes.
And they'll buy one in year 7 and then they have to buy another one in year 10. So you actually, in effect, I've got 4 kids, so I'm buying 8 devices. At $100 at $1,000 a pop,
goodness.
And then my mum's a high school teacher, has been for 50 years, and she said that she's watched this whole transition into technology and says that the technical failures, the mishaps and breakages and losing them, it is a nightmare. And by the time all that gets sorted out, they haven't started the learning activity.
And it's a lot of pressure to put on kids as well.
And the teachers to have all that kind of technical knowledge that they can whip out at a moment's notice.
I mean, in some ways for teachers it's great because it's right there. You no longer have to share a World Book Encyclopedia and find out stuff, or schedule a library time to be able to get in there and do it. And that's great. It is fantastic for teachers and fantastic for kids to have it at their fingertips. But it is a lot of pressure for kids to carry a device with them everywhere. Be careful that they don't lose it on the bus or, hold it close to them in case someone takes it off them on the bus. That's a lot of pressure.
It is.
It is a lot of pressure. And there are some really cool, fun games. Let's just make one little quick point about this. There are some great, fun things kids can do with technology. But I will just add a big but that it's only one tiny part of a play repertoire of any child, and it comes at a cost.
Absolutely. All right, we might roll into my recommendation, my tip, which is probably more of a challenge, and it's for parents, it's for teachers, and it's to really try to detach from their phone or, their tablet device, whatever they use for a lot of things, just over the following week after listening to this episode. So really be a bit more aware. And to do it, I think you're probably going to need to turn off notifications. You might need to delete apps that you find addictive. I know that I do that. Most apps I don't have on my phone because otherwise it just lures me in. And if you're someone who would rather self-administer electric shocks than spend time in your own company, you might need to do some self-work to like yourself, love yourself
a little bit.
Oh, my gosh. I love it.
I would also, in that challenge you're issuing too, Claire, I would also challenge parents and teachers to be a little bit more mindful and aware of how their children act after they come off those devices, which is what we've talked about,
Yeah.
Because I know, like, we have a family movie night every Friday here in the house, and we do popcorn and, we all sit together and it's a lovely time for us, and the kids absolutely love it. But my 7-year-old son acts like a maniac when that movie is finished. Like, he will run from the one end of the house to the other, jumping off furniture, and we understand why, and at least we can cater for that. But, just get people to have a look at that And then,
Yes.
you know, how can you counteract that and help them after rather than going, oh, my goodness.
And if anyone
It's
doubts,
not all behaviour. It is not all
Absolutely.
about
Yeah.
behaviour.
if anyone doubts that this is a thing, as an adult, not a child, as an adult, watch an episode of The Handmaid's Tale and just notice how you feel afterwards. Like, it might just be an hour, but it can very distinctly change your mood. That show is torturous, and I still watch it every week.
Yeah.
All right. This has been a brilliant chat, and it's a very long episode. So I think we better quickly
So get your
wrap
popcorn.
things up. Yeah, we should have said that at the start. I had a feeling it would be a long one. But maybe before we go, Nat and Anna, you can let everyone know what your business name is and where they can find you. So we'll start with you, Nat.
Yeah, so I'm Natalie Smith and I'm the Director of Brilliant Boys Education. So you can find me at brilliantboys.com.au, and I'm in Perth, so I'm available for consults with teachers, in-services, PDs, and I'm also speaking at a couple of conferences upcoming too. So that's where you can find me, and on Facebook too.
Excellent. And you, Nat? Not you, Nat. See, I'm fried after an hour of technology. Anna.
We're going to need to go to the park and have a play after this, aren't we?
Yeah,
Have a walk along the beach.
in our respective parks.
Yeah, have a walk along the beach in our different states. I love that. We've covered Adelaide, Perth, and Melbourne. I'm in Melbourne. My name's Anna Meadows, and I'm a paediatric occupational therapist and play advocate. And my website is kidsplayspace.com.au, and I've also got the social media channels as well: Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, talking about technology. Gosh, and and I love speaking with early childhood educators, primary school educators, teachers around play and childhood development and sensory processing. I'm available for workshops and consultancy as well. Yeah, all details on the web.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me again, Nat and Anna. It's been a delight.
Thank you. So lovely to talk to you again.
Always lovely, guys.
And if you listening in have more topic ideas that you want us to chat about as a trio, I think we'd really enjoy that. So you can just drop me a line at Thriving Children on Facebook, or send me an email, claire@thrivingchildren.com.au. Take care. Thanks for tuning in to the extra long episode. And until next time, be kind to yourself.
Thanks for listening to the Thriving Children podcast. For even more goodness, visit thrivingchildren.com.au.
Whew, an hour, guys.